Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we explore the powerful intersections of courage, adversity, and justice. Today's story reveals a shocking encounter between a young girl and those meant to serve and protect. A tale of resilience and a father's unwavering fight for his daughter's dignity. Let's uncover this inspiring journey. Maya Johnson, a bright-eyed 13-year-old, walked down the bustling streets of Westwood with an easy rhythm in her step. It was late afternoon, and the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees that lined the sidewalks, and the scent of freshly cut grass lingered in the air. It was a day that felt alive, filled with the promise of something good. For Maya, this was more than just another walk home. It was a special day, one she had been looking forward to all week. She was heading to the Westwood Police Precinct to surprise her father, Captain Marcus Johnson, a towering figure of strength and compassion in her life. Marcus was everything Maya aspired to be. He was known throughout the city for his fairness and dedication to justice, a man who carried the weight of his badge with both pride and humility. As she strolled through the familiar streets, Maya's mind wandered to the stories her father would share at dinner, tales of his work in the community, helping those in need and standing up for what was right. He wasn't just her father, he was her hero. Today, she planned to surprise him with a visit, her way of showing him how much she admired everything he did. A small gift she had saved for, a polished pen with his name engraved on it, was tucked safely in her bag. It wasn't much, but she knew it would mean the world to him. The streets of Westwood were alive with their usual hum of activity. Cars zipped by, their tires hissing against the asphalt, and shop owners waved to familiar faces as they swept the sidewalks outside their stores. Children laughed as they played games on front lawns, their voices carrying on the warm breeze. Maya hummed softly to herself, her steps light, her heart full. She imagined the smile on her father's face when he saw her standing in his office doorway, her small surprise in hand. That thought alone quickened her pace. As she neared the corner of Maple and Elm Streets, she noticed a fire truck parked at the curb ahead. Its gleaming red body reflected the afternoon sunlight, and a group of firefighters lounged nearby, their voices loud and jovial as they shared stories and laughter. Maya paid them little attention at first. They were just part of the scenery, another thread in the tapestry of her neighborhood. But as she drew closer, something shifted. The laughter grew quieter, replaced by low murmurs and sideways glances in her direction. "Hey, kid," one of them called out, his voice cutting through the gentle hum of the street. Maya hesitated, her heart skipping a beat as she looked up. The man who had spoken was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the crisp uniform of a firefighter. His stance was relaxed, but there was something in his tone, something sharp and mocking, that made her stomach twist. "Where are you off to in such a hurry?" he asked, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. Maya stopped, unsure of how to respond. It felt rude to ignore him, yet something about his tone made her want to keep moving. "I'm just going to see my dad," she replied cautiously, her voice polite but firm. The firefighter raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Your dad? Huh? And who might that be?" Maya hesitated. Normally, she would have answered proudly, but there was something about the way he asked that made her wary. Still, she lifted her chin slightly, meeting his gaze. "Captain Marcus Johnson," she said, her voice steady. "He's the captain at the Westwood Police Precinct." The man exchanged a glance with his companions, and the mood shifted again. Their laughter returned, but this time it was different, harsher, edged with something almost cruel. Maya's unease deepened as she watched them, her pulse quickening. "Oh, so the kid's got herself a big-shot dad," another firefighter sneered, stepping forward. He was shorter than the first man but stocky, with a roughness in his voice that made Maya take an instinctive step back. "Well, isn't that something?" Maya's grip on her bag tightened as she tried to maintain her composure. "I need to go," she said quietly, glancing toward the precinct just a few blocks away. But before she could move, the first man reached for a large hose coiled on the side of the truck, his smirk growing wider. "Not so fast," he said, his tone playful yet menacing. "We got to show Captain Johnson's little girl how much we appreciate her visit." As Maya pushed open the heavy glass doors of the Westwood Police Precinct, the warmth inside wrapped around her like a fragile cocoon. But it did little to thaw the cold that had settled deep within her. She paused just inside, her wet shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Heads turned, eyes widening as officers and staff noticed the soaked, trembling girl standing in the entryway. "Maya," a familiar voice called out, tinged with alarm. Officer Brian Carter, a longtime colleague and family friend, rose from his desk and approached quickly, his brow furrowed as he took in her drenched clothes and pale, tear-streaked face. "What happened to you?" Maya struggled to find her voice. Her lips quivered as she clutched the blanket of her bag tighter, its soaked strap slipping against her fingers. I need to see my dad," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Without hesitation, Carter placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Come on, sweetheart," he said softly. "He's in his office. Let's get you to him." The walk down the long hallway felt surreal to Maya. Rows of desks blurred past her, officers pausing their work to watch as she passed. Whispers rippled through the room, their concerned murmurs filling the air. Maya kept her gaze fixed ahead, her focus narrowing to the only thing that mattered, her father. When they reached the slightly ajar door to Captain Marcus Johnson's office, Carter knocked firmly. "Captain," he called out, his voice steady but urgent. "It's Maya. Come in," Marcus replied, his tone distracted as he shuffled papers on his desk. The door swung open, and his gaze lifted, only to freeze at the sight of his daughter. The stack of papers slipped from his hands, forgotten, as he rose abruptly from his chair. "Maya," he said, his voice low and filled with disbelief. In 2 strides, he was in front of her, kneeling down to her level. "What happened?" he asked, his hands gripping her shoulders gently but firmly, his eyes scanning her face for answers. "The dam broke." Maya's lips quivered as the tears she had been holding back spilled over. "It was them," she sobbed, her voice shaking. "The firefighters, they sprayed me with water. They wouldn't stop. They laughed at me." Marcus's expression darkened, the warmth in his eyes replaced by a fierce, protective anger. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she trembled against him. "It's okay, Maya," he murmured, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "You're safe now. I got you." He glanced up at Carter, his jaw tightening. "Get her a blanket and some dry clothes," he ordered, "and call Sergeant Blake. I want to handle this immediately." Carter nodded and left the room, his movements brisk. Marcus turned his attention back to Maya, pulling back slightly to look her in the eyes. "You did the right thing coming here," he said gently. "I'm so proud of you for being brave." Maya sniffled, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I didn't do anything to them," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did they do it?" Marcus's heart ached at her words. He wished he could erase the pain and confusion etched across her face. But all he could do was reassure her. "Sometimes people are cruel because of their own faults," he said softly. "But this was not your fault, Maya, and I promise you, they won't get away with it." Carter returned moments later with a warm blanket, which Marcus wrapped around Maya's shoulders. He smoothed back her damp hair, his touch gentle but firm. "I need to speak with some people about what happened," he said, "but I'll be right here. You're not alone in this." Maya nodded, her small frame still trembling but steadied by her father's presence. As Marcus stood and walked toward the door, she watched him go, her heart heavy yet hopeful. She knew he would fight for her. He always did. But even as she sat there wrapped in the blanket, the weight of what had happened lingered, a reminder of how quickly innocence could be shattered. Marcus Johnson strode through the precinct with a purpose that turned heads. His usually calm and collected demeanor had given way to a storm of barely contained fury. Officers and staff quickly stepped aside as he made his way toward the operations room, where Sergeant Kevin Blake was reviewing reports with his team. "Blake," Marcus called out, his voice cutting through the hum of conversation. The sergeant looked up, his face hardening as he saw the fire in his captain's eyes. "We need to talk. Now." Blake nodded, dismissing the other officers with a wave of his hand. "What's going on, Captain?" he asked as Marcus approached. Marcus wasted no time. "Maya was harassed and humiliated by a group of firefighters on her way here," he said, his voice low but vibrating with anger. "They used a hose to drench her and mocked her the entire time. I want them identified and brought in for questioning immediately." Blake's expression darkened. "The firefighters?" he repeated, disbelief flickering across his face. "At Westwood Fire Station?" "That's right," Marcus confirmed. "She recognized their truck and described them to me. I wanted to contact their station and have the men responsible sent here." Blake nodded, his jaw tightening. "Consider it done." As Blake left to make the calls, Marcus leaned against the edge of a desk, his mind racing. The thought of grown men, a group entrusted with public safety, using their power to humiliate his daughter, made his blood boil. But beyond his anger was a deeper sense of betrayal. He had spent his career building relationships with other first responders, ensuring collaboration and mutual respect between their departments. Now, that trust had been broken in the most personal and unforgivable way. Returning to his office, Marcus found Maya sitting quietly, wrapped in the blanket Officer Carter had brought her. Her damp hair framed her face, and her fingers clutched the edges of the fabric tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her together. He crouched beside her, his tone softening. "Maya, Sergeant Blake is handling everything. The men who did this will be brought here to answer for what they've done." Maya nodded slowly, but didn't meet his eyes. "Do you think they'll say I made it up?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "They might lie." Marcus's heart clenched at her words. "No one is going to doubt you, sweetheart," he said firmly. "You are brave for speaking up, and the truth will come out. I won't let them get away with this." Before long, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hallway. Blake appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "They're on their way," he informed Marcus. 3 of them, Jake Thompson, Rick Sanders, and Todd Williams. The station chief wasn't happy about it, but I made it clear this wasn't optional. "Good," Marcus replied. "Bring them straight to the interview room when they arrive." Blake nodded and disappeared again. Marcus turned back to Maya. "Do you want to stay here, or would you rather wait in another room?" Maya hesitated, then shook her head. "I want to stay," she said quietly. "I want to see what happens." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "All right," he said. "But remember, you don't have to do this alone. I'm right here." Minutes later, the firefighters were led into the precinct. Their confident strides faltered as they entered, their faces betraying varying degrees of unease. It was one thing to laugh at a young girl when no one was watching. It was another to stand before Captain Marcus Johnson, whose reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for misconduct was well known. As they passed the office, their gazes landed on Maya. She sat stiffly in her chair, her small frame wrapped in the oversized blanket, her eyes red from tears. For a brief moment, one of the men, Rick Sanders, looked away, guilt flickering across his face. But Jake Thompson, the ringleader, smirked slightly, as if unwilling to show weakness. Marcus's gaze was icy as he watched them pass. The urge to confront them then and there burned within him. But he held back. This needed to be handled by the book. He wouldn't give them any room to claim bias or unfair treatment. Once the men were seated in the interview room, Marcus joined Blake and the lead investigator. "Officer Carter, let's get this started," Marcus said. "They need to know exactly what they're facing." The men's laughter and bravado from earlier had vanished. Sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the interrogation room, they shifted uncomfortably as the weight of the situation began to settle. Marcus stood behind the two-way mirror, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, watching as the questioning began. For the first time that day, Maya allowed herself a small breath of relief. She wasn't alone. Her father was fighting for her, and the men who had hurt her would finally face the consequences of their actions. The interrogation room was tense. The once boisterous firefighters now subdued under the scrutiny of Officer Carter and Sergeant Blake. Their excuses were thin. Claims of just joking around or harmless fun fell flat. Marcus, standing behind the two-way mirror, felt no satisfaction as he watched them squirm. Their lack of remorse only deepened his resolve to ensure they face consequences. After gathering the statements and reviewing Maya's account, Blake confirmed the next steps: an internal investigation at the fire department and formal charges of harassment. Marcus nodded, his expression steely. It wasn't enough to repair what Maya had endured, but it was a start. These men would no longer abuse their positions unchecked. Back in his office, Marcus found Maya waiting quietly. Her eyes searched his face, looking for reassurance. "It's done," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "They've been held accountable, and I'm proud of you for standing strong." Maya leaned into his embrace, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to see you, Dad, not all of this." Marcus's heart ached, but he held her tightly. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry this happened, but you're brave, and you've shown them, and me, how strong you are." Over the following weeks, Maya began to heal. The community rallied behind her, offering support and solidarity. The firefighters faced public condemnation, their actions a stark reminder of the responsibility that comes with authority. At home, Marcus made sure Maya knew she wasn't alone. They spent more time together, talking, laughing, and rebuilding her trust in the world. Though the memory of that day lingered, it no longer held power over her. With her father by her side, Maya found her strength again, proof that even in the face of cruelty, dignity and justice could prevail. Thank you for joining us at Empathy Stories, where we shine a light on the strength and resilience found in even the darkest moments. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share these powerful narratives that inspire change and unity. Until next time, stay compassionate and courageous.